Do llms.txt files matter for AEO? The llms.txt standard was introduced to provide a way for LLMs to access like friendly plain text, usually markdown information about a website. There are a bunch of common misunderstandings about this and confusion, mostly because different resources, even by the same institutions, are providing what looks at first like contradictory information. So let's say you go to Google's AI optimization guide that they just released. On here, they actually have a myth-busting section where they mention that you don't actually need llms.txt files or any other special markup. And this is specifically for Google search and its usage of AI to respond to search queries. But if you go to Google Chrome's Lighthouse section where they actually evaluate agentic browsing features of your site, they recommend llms.txt and show a failure if you don't do that. And then also, like if you look at many individual accounts of people's websites, many people mention that their server logs don't actually have any hits for llms.txt files, but some people do. So what's going on here? And even if you look at AEO platforms like Profound, for example, they have an llms.txt. It has a description of their company and a lot of different information on that page and a couple of links out. If you look at AirOps, they actually don't have an llms.txt file. It just redirects their homepage. Same for peak.ai. If you do llms.txt here, it just shows not found. Athena, however, does have an llms.txt file, but it's basically a sitemap for them, or at least a partial sitemap. And then for our own site on Elmo, we have an llms.txt with some information and some links to other pages, and then also ask people to star our repo. So what's the deal with this inconsistency? And I think the most helpful way to look at this is across the different ways AI search might actually end up looking for this file. So the first thing is that if an LLM, like the actual model itself, is trained to handle llms.txt files, it may do something with them. But if you go to, like, let's say chatgpt.com and you ask, like, what is an llms.txt file and would you use it if I asked you to search the web? Let's see what it says. So it does know that it's a post standard, and it even has like examples, and it says potentially, but only if it's available and relevant, but it doesn't automatically visit every site. It's llm.txt. So this is a call made without web search enabled, so that model actually knows something about llms.txt, but it's not actually going to use it most of the time. So across like almost all LMs that are modern, they know llms.txt files exist, but they don't actually actively use it at the model level. And then you get up one level past that where you look at the system prompts. And a way to do that is to look at leaked system prompts. There's actually a repo of these on GitHub. And you can search through this whole thing. There's not a single mention of llms.txt across any of the system prompts. So the system prompts themselves aren't directing you to look at llms.txt while doing web searches. So then there's another layer above that, which is the harness. So like think like Claude Code or Codex or something like that. So maybe something that's agentic. So not the, ChatGPT websites queries that might result in a search, or like searching on Google and looking at AI mode. Those things don't use llms.txt. But if you're using like Claude Code or something like that, well, let's check the leaked Claude Code source. And there's also no mention of llms.txt outside of a hard-coded link to their own for some like internal usage. So they don't actually instruct to look at this file. So that leaves the final option, which is Well, actually, there are two more. So there's another case where like you might have an agents.md file or skill or something like that. Like if you look at like some of the skill files out there, some people actually have skills specifically to better consume llms.txt files because some people believe that's helpful for their AI agent. If you search on GitHub, there's a bunch of agents.md files that have llms.txt information. Some specifically say to load this in advance when looking at data relevant to their own projects. There are a bunch of different ways that people approach it, but there might be something that is provided as context to an AI agent that tells it to look at llms.txt. So it's not like super common, but it's possible. And the final thing that happens the most is having some sort of link on the website that is available to an AI agent that sees that there's an llms.txt file. And then the agent follows that link and then consumes the markdown content. So what does that look like? So for Elmo, for example, if you go to one of our docs pages, down at the bottom of each docs page, there's this view as markdown link, which happens to append a .md at the end of each of these URLs. And if you go to that, it has a markdown version of that same page. So if you look at something like Peak also, for example, this is how they handle it in their docs. Like if you go to one of their docs pages here, you can go .md as well and get something like this. We both happen to use a tool called Fuma Docs, which makes this pretty easy and has some like tooling around it. But the idea basically is that you want to provide the markdown information to agents, but the way you do that doesn't necessarily have to be the llms.txt file. So there's really no penalty to providing an llms.txt, and if you link to it, the AI may look at it. So I would generally recommend adding it, especially if you're a developer or like infra-related tool. That's something where somebody's more likely to be using one of these agentic systems to actually access your docs. And if that's the case, you probably want some sort of link to a markdown version available. So if all this sounds interesting, you'd probably get some value out of using a tool like Elmo to actually track AI visibility for your brand and figure out what to do to make your brand more understandable by AI agents and AI search. Thanks.